Alright, so today is the day I was sort of regretting, yet also kind of excited for. So this is going to be a video about basically everything in my own version of the Avali, my own sort of fan rewrite. Now before I continue, remember, I do not claim to own the Avali. I don't. I'm simply a fan of them. Not even the sense of being a furry. I'm just a fan of the species because they're fucking cool. And they deserve a way better lore than they already have. So, in theory, I basically only changed two things about the Avali. The type of blood they have, and also what Avalon is like. But I'm gonna go the extra mile and flesh them out a bit more. So this video is gonna be about that. Covering everything. I'm going to retread some stuff I've already talked about, but that's expected when you're re-going over something you wrote and expanding upon it. You're going to go back to that old territory. It's just how it works. So, let's start things off. Let's start things off with Avalon itself. Itself as a moon orbiting the gas giant that I'm just going to call Ava. Now, Ava can mean many different things. I'm just going to say that it probably means something like mother in an old language that they don't use anymore, the Avali. So, the gas giant itself is about the size of Saturn. So, it's a fairly large gas giant. There's bigger ones out there, but it's pretty big. And because it's so close to the star that it orbits, it's a turbulent motherfucker. So there's a lot of storms on it. At night, you'd be able to see these storms on Avalon's surface. Avalon being one of the closer moons to it. So close, in fact, that it kind of dominates the night sky. There would be other moons too, of course. It wouldn't just be Avalon. There'd be other moons. Maybe some of them would be habitable. Maybe some of them would not be. Maybe they don't have any atmospheres. So maybe they'd be just ones to, find some resources or whatever, which is likely something the Avali would do. Anyway, steering away from the gas giant, let's look at Avalon itself. What does it look like? Well, from the atmosphere, you would see a lot of green. It's a very, very lush world. About the size of Earth. Not quite as large as Earth. It would have about 10% less gravity than Earth, meaning if you weighed 100 pounds on Earth, you weighed 90 on Avalon. An Avali's average weight is about 70 pounds, so they would weigh around 77 on Earth. 10%. 7% difference. Very easy to understand. But it's not just forests on this planet. There's a few large deserts, the main one being the West Great Desert, which I'll get to in a moment. It's very important. There's tundras, plains, jungles, swamps, lakes, ponds, oceans, etc. So very much like Earth, but a lot greener. Anyway, now let's go to the Avali themselves. Now, in my rewrite, in what I say with the Avali, there's three breeds. The Forest Valley, which is your standard Avali that live in the forest, the Nat Valley, who live in the deserts, and the Diwali, who are the sort of tundra dwellers, sort of like Eskimos or Inuits. In some respects. Not exactly. So, with the Forest Valley, these guys are the ones with the most tech. These guys are the ones that use tech the most. And the Avalonian forests and the Avalonian trees are huge. The trees are very tall. Like small skyscrapers, in fact. So big, and so big around as well with the trunks, that the Avali can carve homes inside of them and it wouldn't hurt a tree. So they can literally live inside of the trees. And some of these trees would have been carved out for thousands of years. I mean, if the tree's big enough and you have the tools to, why not? It would take a while, but why not? Now, they don't just live in the trees. There's also built structures. Like major facilities, like military bases would be built. Major conglomerates, major businesses, other things like that would be built, and how it's built is using nanolathes and nanolooms. Nanolathes use carbon to make solid structures, like posts, walls, etc. Nanolooms are used to make clothing and tents and other sorts of fabrics using carbon. How this works, this is going to sound really sci-fi, but it's kind of based in reality if you cannot believe it. It takes the carbon, okay, like a raw lump of carbon, and it strings it out molecule by molecule into strands, and then it puts these strands together and weaves them together. This gives you a super light and super strong material. Avali tents can stop bullets. That's pretty incredible, and Avali civilian clothing could probably also probably stop like some cartridges here on Earth, some rifle rounds, some pistol rounds. But that's neither here nor there. It doesn't really matter. It's just how they make their clothing. So they're all wearing carbon. But it's very smooth and soft. So it kind of feels like a smooth cotton. And it's also ridiculously light. You wouldn't even know you're wearing it if you couldn't feel it. It's that lightweight. Same thing with their guns, and everything else is just super light because of the materials they use. They have windows, of course, but it's aerogel. If not aerogel, then it's glass or some sort of polyurethane. I don't think they would use much plastics. Maybe they would. Either way, just other than their structures, what is like the normal, average, everyday social interaction life of these forest volley? Well, they're pack-oriented. A pack can be up to about 5 to 10 members, but that's kind of pushing it. I think they would average about 5 or 6 members because that's just easier to run. There'd be a pack leader and his or her second higher up, which might be their mate. So the pack would be, they would do everything together: eat, sleep, play, work, everything. And they would have been raised basically together or have known each other for a very long time. If they're not hatched together, then they were raised together. Yes, Avali lay eggs. Up to 3 per litter? Laying? I don't know what the term is. But anyway, if one desires to become a pack leader, then it is simply just to challenge the pack leader to some sort of task or prove that you're a better leader than them. It's not like a brutal fight or anything, although that might happen depending on what kind of pack leader you have and what kind of pack you're in. Maybe it's a competition to see who can hunt down the biggest beast. Maybe it's a competition to see who is actually the smartest or the best leader. You be creative with how you want to come up with that. Anyway, what other kind of technologies do they have? Well, basically name any sort of sci-fi tech that isn't laser weapons, and they basically have it. Their own types of speeder bikes, see-through aluminum would probably be on their ships, and yes, it's an actual thing. Transparent aluminum is a thing, as is transparent wood, believe it or not. All sorts of a slew of just high-tech, efficient, lightweight materials to build stuff with. And the best part about Avali stuff is because most of it is carbon, you can break it down, turn it back into, just raw carbon, and use it again. Use it for whatever. Take a wall down if you want a hunting rifle, sort of thing. I'm not kidding, neither. Now, their weapons are all railguns. So if you don't know what a railgun is, it uses an electromagnetic pulse to launch a solid metal projectile at ridiculously high speeds. We have railguns in real life, but they're huge, and we don't really have the means to make them portable. For the Avali, they do. And their weapons are very lightweight and very simple and super reliable and very potent. So it would probably, like some of the rifles would take a 1-ounce slug and fire it like Mach 3 or 4. That's a lot of kinetic energy. That's more than the 50 BMG that we have here on Earth. That's more than a 55 boys or a 14 millimeter. That is a huge amount of power. But there'd be basically no recoil because the only recoil would come from the projectile leaving the weapon. because it's all electromagnetic. There's no explosion. So, and their batteries would be carbon nanotubes, and carbon nanotubes are fantastic. We don't quite have them in high numbers, but the Avali would, because they're just carbon arranged in a certain order. Carbon rods in a certain order to trap electrons. That's kind of all it is. And these batteries would last a very, very, very long time and have a huge, huge output. So the only real thing you'd need to change on an Avali weapon, other than the magazine every now and then, there'd be a magazine. It wouldn't 3D print ammo. That seems a bit too complicated and too heavy. You would need to change the batteries every now and then, or just plug it into your wall and it's charged. So you can literally just I'm charging my hunting rifle. Let's go hunting a few hours later, okay? I'm busy right now. It's got to charge, sort of thing. And yeah, you could just print a gun at home. I kind of want to go hunting today. Just look up on the essentially Avali internet, find a blueprint for a gun you want, and then you print it. That's fucking cool. Okay, that's so cool. And their information network would just be called like the Avali Information Network, AIN, or Avalon Information Network, because it would go around the entire moon. So just AIN, go on AIN, and get your gun, get your clothes or whatever. Oh boy! All right, that covers the Forest Volley. There's a few other things, but I'm gonna come back to that once I talk about the Avali Illuminite. But now let's talk about the Nat Valley. The Nat Valley are the more traditional people. They live out in the desert, namely the Great West Desert. And the Great West Desert is huge, probably larger than the Sahara Desert. It's a massive desert and very hot. But they live out there. They're fine with it. They're perfectly adapted for the desert anyway. Thinner feathers, and all of that, so they don't trap heat as much. Lighter colors to reflect the sunlight. I forgot to mention that Forest Volley would have browns, blues, greens, oranges in their feathers. Feather dyeing is also a thing. Albino is also a thing, but extremely rare. And the Nat Valley would have dustier colors. Tans, browns, beige, some reds, desert colors. Maybe a greens here and there, sort of. Yellows. But either way, they are very identifiable by just their body structure and the front tooth. The front tooth it's just a front tooth, but some tribes, I would imagine, would take it in high regard. If you don't have a front tooth, you're a nobody, because you've been stripped of what makes you different. Maybe some sort of, and it sounds really ridiculous, but it's very plausible. So they're more traditional. They don't use as much technology, but they do use technology. They have, water filtration systems or some sort of pump to get water out of the desert, because there's actually a lot of water in deserts, depending on where you look, deep underground. They would have their own sort of generators, probably solar or wind power, or even thermal power, because the sand would get pretty damn hot, and you might be able to get some energy out of it. They would have refrigeration, maybe some kind of entertainment like TV. Yeah, Avali TV. Maybe the internet as well. But that's kind of basically it. They wouldn't really rely on technology as much as, say, the Forest Volley. For their weapons, they would probably be way more traditional and not just 3D print everything. They would actually take the time and the effort to find the materials and forge their swords and axes and craft all these other things. But they might use Avali style guns, because kind of trying to make, like, say, a bolt action rifle like we have here on Earth, to them might be just not worth it, because you would have to get the right kind of explosive. You would have to tool everything. You have to make sure it's rifled perfectly. It would just be a major pain in the ass, and the recoil might be a bit much, because Avali aren't stronger than humans. No, they are actually fairly frail creature. Average height for the average Avali is 3'2" to 3'9". Nat Valley average 3'4" to about 4'2". So they're a bit taller than all the other Avali. giants do exist, but they are plagued with arthritis, back pain, all that other stuff. And maybe like the tallest one only got about 5 feet. So, and a shortened lifespan, of course, because it's essentially gigantism. I also forgot to mention that these Avali have iridium-based blood. No ammonia, because that is one of the worst blood types you can possibly have for a fictional creature. Or a real creature. It's terrible. It's terrible. A few other basic anatomies. They don't really have nasal cavities to smell. They flick their tongues like snakes. They have forked tongues to smell. So they flick their tongues. So I think it's fine. So a little bit more with the social structure of the Nat Valley. It really depends per tribe. Some tribes are very friendly, very welcoming. They'll watch you very closely, suspiciously maybe. But no harm, no foul. They're fine. You can go say hello to them and check out their village. Maybe try their cuisine. They wouldn't care. I'd be completely fine. Other Nat Valley tribes would be pretty standoffish, pretty shutterbuggy. Wouldn't really like the outsiders inside of their place, inside of their home, and would be very suspicious of some people. I would also assume that Nat Valley would mostly speak through normal Valley sounds with their chirps, trills, and whistles. Forest Valley too, but I'm pretty sure they would have some sort of spoken language. Or they could learn English super quick when humans come into play, which is a thing. I already explained this in the part 2 of my Avali rewrite of the Galactic Governments. I'm not going to go over that again because there's really no point, even though I'm going over some stuff again, but I'm adding to it. Anyway, so what are some mannerisms of the Nat Valley? Well, if you go into a Nat Valley tribe place, a Nat Valley home, or, essentially a small little village, and you don't really see anybody. Maybe you'll see like someone peeking out. They're probably a very cautious bunch, but if armed guards are looking at you, giving you a stink eye, you're probably not welcome, or they're probably super paranoid of you. It really would just depend tribe by tribe. It really would. You couldn't bunch them all into one, because I assume there would be a lot of tribes in that huge desert. And you might be wondering, wait a minute, do these tribes fight each other? Well, maybe, but at the same time, I don't think they would want to. I think it would only be out of, say, a crazy tribe is trying to attack them, or one of their own has been kidnapped, or some eggs go missing and they find out what tribe did it. Then they're coming for blood, 'cause that's not cool, bro. So there's that. Nat Valley are known for being pretty damn good warriors as well. And they can be seen on interstellar ships, mostly as guards. And I guess some of them would try to be friendly to everybody else, but Nat Valley would have a sort of a bad reputation. And it's not their fault. It's their ancestors' fault. Sort of like sins of the father much. That Nat Valley are just brutes that, kill whoever they want, take whatever they want, sort of, barbarians, which isn't 100% accurate. And there's also a myth of the deeper you go into the Great West Desert, the more nasty the Nat Valley will become, to the point of them being cannibalistic. But that's just a rumor, right? Anyway, now moving over to the Diwali. These guys, like I said at the beginning, are essentially Eskimos/Inuits. They live in the more cold regions. They have much thicker feathers. They have more blues, whites, grays in their feather colors. Of course, like I said, feather color dye is a thing. I imagine it would be a major pain in the ass to try and color thousands of feathers. Or maybe it'd be super simple and they have some sort of tack for it. They probably do. But they are known as the more gentle people. And they do use technology a lot. Not as much as the Forest Valley, but way more than the Nat Valley. So there's a good mix. The Forest Valley use tech a lot. The Nat Valley don't really. Well, they do, but meh. And the Diwali are sort of mixed. Some of them use technology a lot, some of them not so much. Diwali are also known as the more musical and artsy types. So they're the ones with all the sweet tunes and cool abstract or non-abstract art. So there's that. And they can also be extremely good warriors. Any Avali can be a good warrior. It's sort of in their DNA to fight, but they've moved past it really, but they'll pick up a weapon if they have to. Anyway, now let's move on to the Avali Illuminate. How does it affect an Avali's day-to-day life? Not really. The Illuminite is definitely a super present thing because their tri-feather logo is plastered everywhere. You buy a bottle of water, there's the Avali Illuminite logo. So you might see them as sort of an evil conglomerate, an evil sort of just all-encompassing, all-absorbing corporation, but that's not actually the case. They keep a lot of the stuff secret. They have a lot of secrets, a lot of really top secret, scary crap in their databases. And if you try and access the database and try and see classified information, you will get a really, really scary, really loud voice saying, "Do not proceed," for your own good. And if you try to proceed, you might be arrested because you're not really allowed to see top secret files or whatever. Some files eventually are declassified, but some people say they're fakes, and they might be. Where the Avali Illuminate are mostly concentrated is the capital of Avalon, which I don't have a name for. They would probably just call it Capital. So the Oracle is also here. The Oracle is a supercomputer AI with sentience. Has it gone rogue in the past? No one really knows, because if it did, that event would have been scrubbed from the history books, because they don't want people to panic. But they don't really pay attention to it. It gives good advice, but they always take the advice with a grain of salt and not follow it blindly. Although there is a group that do follow the Avali Illuminite's Oracle closely because they worship it like a god. It's a cult. It's a straight up cult. They're relatively small in numbers and they're seen as harmless, just dumb. Like, what are you doing? It's a freaking computer. It's not a god. What the hell? And these guys are the ones that cyberpunk themselves by augmenting themselves to hell until they're more machine than Avali, which that's got to be expensive. It's like plastic surgery in real life. I want to be a Ken doll. I spent like $1 million. Yikes. I don't know what the Avali currency would be. Probably just like credits, or I don't know, credits on little pieces of aerogel. Whatever. They have so much of it, they might as well use it as currency, right? It's pretty funny. Anyway, like I said, the Avali Illuminite really doesn't affect the average Joe Schmo Avali's day-to-day life, unless they are part of the government. Unless they are part of the ADF, which is the Avalon Defense Force, which is the military, or the AEF, Avalon Exploratory Force, which is I guess you could say, a subsect of the military, but it's not really militarized, it's more civilian. But there are military guards, just to be sure. So it's kind of a hybrid in a way. So if you're part of one of those, yeah, the Avali Illuminite is going to have a lot of say in what you do. And a lot of, Avali that have gone through very classified missions cannot talk about them at all. And depending on who you ask, what they've done is from good to horrid. But it's usually good. Usually seen as good. Now, the group of Avali that really do not trust the Avali Illuminite and the Oracle are the more traditional Nat Valley. They see the Oracle as making the Avali weak. They see the Avali Illuminite as just, why do we need a centralized government? We're governing ourselves perfectly fine. And sometimes the Avali Illuminite might be called, if a tribe is rowdy, as they say. It's a rowdy tribe, meaning the tribe is violent. So understandably, some of the Nat Valley feel like they're being trapped by this, all-encompassing government, but it's always for the greater good. It's always to help the people. The Avali Illuminite's always for the people. That's what they say. We're here for you. That's their slogan. We're here for you. Some people don't believe it. Some people do. But, there's there's not going to be a revolution or anything. It's just how it is. And like I said, the Avali Illuminite is very standoffish, very hands-off approach unless they are absolutely required. So, it's a long video, y'all. There is a fuck ton to cover, and I am very sorry, but when you're making detailed lore, there's a lot. And I'm probably not even covering everything. What about, like, average, everyday, civilian services, like jobs and everything? Well, everything under the sun is to your ability. Whatever you want to do with your life. Of course, there would be free education. There would be free further education, which is essentially college to get any sort of degree you want. Engineering, biology, ship maintenance, etc., etc., etc. You name it, you can go do it. As long as it's not illegal. So, that's fairly simple. It's all free because education is a right. Because, it's an advanced alien species. They would see education as super important, one of the most important things. And they would have nuclear fusion power powering their cities with some wind, solar, thermal, and that stuff like that, renewable energy. And so electricity would be super easy, very cheap, all that stuff. Avali can hunt for their food, or they can go to grocery stores to get whatever they want. What is like a normal Avali's diet? They're omnivores. They eat, fruit, meat, veggies, basically everything. Although some Forest Valley are more fruit. They eat more fruit than anything else. Some Nat Valley eat way more meat than anything else because not a lot of fruit is going to be growing in the desert. Though there are some fruits out there. But they're really hard to get your hands on and really sought after. Even if they taste like crap, they're really sought after because they basically don't grow anywhere else. You can have your own hydroponics to grow whatever plant you want. And I bet when some humans heard about this, oh man, we can grow our own weed in hydroponics. Let's do it. I mean, yeah, you can. So there's all that. If you're joining the military or the exploratory force, you go under training as you would. Military would most likely be training with powered armor because Avali by themselves are very frail creatures. They have a lot of stamina because their iridium-based blood is very oxygen efficient, but that's all they have. They don't really have a lot of brute strength or speed or really much agility. I'd say they'd be fairly agile, but when it comes to taking a hit, they'd be pretty bad at it. They wouldn't have hollow bones like birds, and no, they cannot fly. They can glide sometimes, but they cannot flap their wings and fly. They're too large, their wings are too small, their muscles are too small, doesn't work. Maybe if the gravity on a planet is super low and very dense atmosphere, but that's very rare. But anyway, the AEF would most likely train a lot of people to use basically powered armor as well, but it would be more geared towards mining. Although it could be used to defend someone, because if it can break a rock, it can break a face. Brutal and crude, but they're right. So asteroid mining would be a very, very big business. You'd make a lot of money doing this. Basically punching rocks all day and drilling it and shooting it with lasers and everything. Mining lasers. All that kind of stuff. Very cool. So that's the jobs. So what happens when an Avali couple lay an egg? How do they incubate it? Well, heat lamps, essentially. They can just 3D print a little incubation chamber for them, for their eggs, and wait. I think it'd take about a month for the egg to hatch, and then they would have a kit. Avali kids are called kits. They're called kits until they hit like 15, 16. They still might be called kits, but, anything above that would be seen as adult. Like, they're fully grown, they're not grown anymore, they're an adult. The average Avali lifespan is 200 years without augmentation. With augmentation, it could be extended probably like 50 or 60 more years, but that's kind of pushing it. And the body would probably be degrading at this point, especially the mind would be degrading, like dementia. So, not recommended. let the old guy die. Let him rest. So there's that. Uh, there is the natural method of incubation, which is just sitting on your egg for, taking turns with your mate for a while until the egg hatches. So there's that. I know I'm making them sound very bird-like, but they lay eggs. They would have to find a way to keep their eggs warm so their babies develop. It makes sense. It makes sense. So an interesting little tidbit with Nat Valley. This is one of the times where they use technology, is for the incubation chambers, because, well, it's just so much simpler and you can still hunt and everything without having to sit on an egg. Could they put them in the desert sand? No, the desert sand is way too hot and it would cook the egg, which is pretty fucked up. What about like eggs that aren't fertile? What happens? They just disintegrate them. They just incinerate them. No, they don't eat the eggs. That's fucking vile. Maybe some Nat Valley tribe do, but ugh, God, that's gross. That's disgusting. That's absolutely fucking horrid and vile, and very frowned upon. So there's that. Anyway, hybrids. Let's talk about some Avali hybrids when they get together and mate. So, if a forest volley and a net volley love each other very much and mate, real quick, I gotta talk about their genitals. Females have a cloaca. Yes, they have a cloaca. Males would have a penis because it is so much simpler for them to have a penis rather than them having a cloaca. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm talking about deep lore here. I have to go. I said deep when I'm talking about genitals. Fuck's sake. You know what I mean? I have to go in depth. That's no better. Anyway. So, let's say this net volley force volley couple, happy couple, lay 3 eggs. Doesn't really matter who's the female here. Okay, so what are the kids gonna look like? Well, first one hatches, and it looks exactly like a net volley. Okay, not too unexpected. Second one hatches, it looks very, very similar to a forest volley. Maybe the net volley baby has sort of forest volley colors, and the third one might look like a pretty decent hybrid between both of them or another net volley. It's very random. It's very possible that a net volley and a forest volley having kits, would have a set of eggs that look exactly like a forest volley, and you would never know unless you had a DNA test done on them. Or vice versa, they all look like net volley, tooth and everything, front tooth and big teeth all over the place. So yeah, it's very random, but same thing with a dove volley, forest volley, dove volley, net volley, dove volley. This triangle of, hybrids. So there's that. Gay couples, definitely a thing. Nothing wrong with it. They can adopt eggs. There'd be definitely facilities to incubate eggs if you don't want to do it at home, or you're not ready and you just weren't wearing protection, and your mate lays some eggs, put them up to adoption. They'll be hatched and raised by another family lovingly, of course, hopefully. They're still scumbags. They're not a perfect people. They're not all sunshine and rainbows. We're all happy. We all love each other. There's douchebags, maybe drunks as well. They would have some sort of alcohol or alcohols. I would imagine it would be like wine. Use a berry to ferment a berry juice. Anyway, Avalon style wine. That sounds fancy. And on Earth, I assume that shit would be expensive as all fuck. I had to take out another loan to get this small bottle of Avali wine, but man, it was worth it. No, it wasn't. So there's that. Gay marriage is a thing, because love is love. You love someone, you love someone. Simple as that. Doesn't matter who they are, what they are. You love them, you love them. What about like volley human couples? That's also perfectly fine. Some people might think it's a bit awkward, but I assume it would be perfectly fine. Anyway, I think that just about covers it. There's a few other things. They would siphon some stuffs off of Ava, the gas giant, because that's a whole heap ton of stuff there. it'd be very dangerous work though. Exploratory ships would be, depending on how large it is, there could be only one pack in there, there could be a few packs in there. So, yeah. Anyway, I guess that just about does it for the Avali lore rewrite. I don't really have much else to talk about after this, so I'm going to say this chapter on my channel is concluded. And I really hope that Raijin Zero takes some of these to heart, or, does something similar to this with when he eventually rewrites the Avali, which I hope he does, because this just makes them more concise, more realistic, more feasible, and it's just cooler. It's just so much cooler. Of course, I am a bit biased. I wrote all this crap. Sort of came up with some of it on the fly as well, admittedly. So, anyway, that's the Avali lore rewrite. From Frozen Wasteland birds that aren't birds, Frozen Wasteland fluffy space raptors, to forested space raptors, some of them also desert dwellers and tundra dwellers. The latter makes more sense. It simply does. Like, you can't have ammonia-based blood work with something that looks like an Avali. Not possible. And their blood would have to be cold, too. On a cold planet. Where the fuck are they getting their metabolism from, huh? The pressure changes, their temperature changes, their blood boils, and they die. It's terrible. Anyway. That's everything. Not really much else to talk about when it comes to rewriting the Avali. I hope you guys enjoyed this extremely long video. I had to cover everything, so I'm not going to drag this along any longer. The recording here is 43 minutes. It's going to be like 30 some minutes for you guys, probably, depending on how much needs to be cut out and different takes, all that stuff. So I'd say let me know what you think, but I won't be able to see your comments anyway unless I go to this video like by the hour and see what you guys think. So, did I waste my time? Did I make you guys cringe your eyes out for me talking about a species that is technically a furry species but can work on its own, just like circles, just like protogens, just like rexiums, whatever. We're talking fiction here. It's fiction. Fiction's fiction, and fiction's cool. Because, it's awesome when it's done well. So, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you die-hard Avali fans don't, pull your hair out at, me dare touching this lore that desperately needs a rewrite, and you all know it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, in Trilby, we trust.